First contact and desperate plea. The silence of deep space was broken by a signal. Faint, almost imperceptible, but definitely artificial. For 3 days, it repeated on a loop, pulsing through the vastness like a heartbeat too weak to sustain life. At Earth's Deep Space Monitoring Station in Antarctica, Dr. Elena Rice stared at the readout, her breath forming small clouds in the frigid air of the control room. "It's not random," she whispered, more to herself than to her colleagues. "There's a pattern. It's language." The discovery should have been humanity's greatest moment. Proof, finally, that we weren't alone in the universe. Instead, it filled Elena with a creeping dread, because this wasn't a greeting or an introduction. It was a plea for help. 3 weeks later, the United Nations Security Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from all major world powers sat in uncomfortable silence as Admiral William Chen presented what they knew. The signal originates from approximately 4.2 light-years away, near the Alpha Centauri system, he explained, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "We've decoded enough to understand the basics. They call themselves the Novali. They're refugees, and they're being hunted." Elena sat in the back of the room, watching the faces of the world's most powerful people as they processed this information. Some showed skepticism, others fear. A few displayed the gleam of opportunity. What technology might these aliens possess? "With all due respect, Admiral," the Russian representative interrupted, "how do we know this isn't a trap? An advanced species could easily fabricate a distress call to lower our guard." Admiral Chen nodded toward Elena, inviting her to respond. She stood, smoothing her wrinkled lab coat. "The Novali have been transmitting consistently for months, cycling through mathematical sequences and universal constants before attempting linguistic communication. This isn't the approach of conquerors. Moreover, the energy signature of their transmission is weak and deteriorating. Whatever they're using to send this message, it's failing." The Chinese representative leaned forward. "And they specifically asked for Earth's help. Why us? We've barely left our own solar system." Elena swallowed hard. This was the part that troubled everyone at the research station. They didn't initially target Earth specifically. The message appears to be a general distress call, but once we responded with our own transmission, they redirected their course toward us. The room erupted in concerned murmurs. The American president raised her hand for silence. "Dr. Reyes, are you suggesting an alien species is now heading to Earth based on our response?" "Yes, Madam President. Their latest communication included navigational data. They'll enter our solar system within 2 months." The Security Council's debate raged for hours. Military leaders advocated caution. Scientists pushed for preparation to meet an advanced species, and politicians worried about public reaction. In the end, it was decided. Humanity would not fire the first shot, but neither would they be caught unprepared. Orbital defense platforms were hastily completed. Military forces worldwide were placed on high alert, and a small team of scientists, linguists, and diplomats, with Elena at its center, prepared for first contact. The day came sooner than expected. The Novali vessel, detected by long-range scanners, was decelerating rapidly as it approached Mars. Unlike the massive ships of science fiction, this craft was small, barely larger than an aircraft carrier. Its surface was pitted and scarred, with sections that appeared to be crudely repaired. "That's not a warship," Elena murmured as she studied the imagery. "It's a lifeboat." The Novali vessel established orbit around Earth's moon, maintaining constant communication. Through increasingly sophisticated exchanges, Elena's team learned more. The Novali were ancient, a species that had explored the stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. They had been peacekeepers, explorers, and scholars. Now, they were fugitives. After weeks of careful negotiation, it was agreed. A single Novali would be permitted to visit Earth, landing at a secure facility in the Mojave Desert. Elena would be part of the welcoming committee. The shuttle was silent as it descended, employing technology that seemed to bend gravity rather than fight it. When the hatch opened, Alina's heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. The being that emerged stood nearly 7 feet tall, but moved with a grace that made it seem weightless. Its body was covered in iridescent scales that shifted color with each movement, currently displaying a calm blue. 6 limbs, 4 arms, and 2 legs allowed for complex, fluid motion, but it was the face that caught Alina's attention. 3 large eyes arranged in a triangle, no visible nose, and a small mouth that didn't move when the translator around its neck spoke. "I am Kalin, last speaker of the High Council of Novali," it said, the voice from the translator sounding oddly melodic. "I bring gratitude for your reception, and regret for the circumstances that bring us to your world." The initial meetings were tense but productive. Kalin proved to be forthright, answering questions directly and asking thoughtful ones in return. Through these exchanges, the full story emerged. The Novali had once been part of a peaceful association of species that spanned dozens of star systems. They had technology beyond human comprehension, including the ability to manipulate gravity, fold space for near-instantaneous travel, and harness the energy of stars without destroying them. But 17 years ago, something entered their territory from the galactic rim, the Vrex. Not a single species, but a collective, a swarm intelligence that consumed everything in its path. Planets were stripped of resources, stars were drained of energy, and species were harvested for biological material. The association fought back with their advanced technology, but the Vrex adapted with terrifying speed. One by one, the member species fell. Some were conquered, others fled to distant galaxies. The Novali, once numbering in the billions, were reduced to less than 1 million souls spread across a handful of refugee ships. "Why Earth?" Admiral Chen asked during a private briefing with Kalin and the core team. "Your technology, even damaged as it is, far surpasses ours. We can't protect you from something that defeated your entire civilization." Kalin's scales shifted to a deep purple, a sign of sadness, they had learned. The Vrex consume technological civilizations. They adapt to and overcome systematic, logical defenses. Your species. Kalin paused, searching for the right words. You are unique in our experience, unpredictable, creative in ways that defy conventional understanding. Your art, your music, your literature. These are concepts many species never develop. You wage war with passion rather than calculation. You love with intensity that would overwhelm most sentient beings. Alina frowned. You're saying you came to us because we're primitive, emotional. I am saying, Kalin replied, scales now shifting to a warm amber, that in our darkest hour, the Novali have turned to humanity because you may possess the one thing the Vrex cannot easily overcome. Unpredictability born of emotion. Where logic failed, perhaps passion will succeed. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. An advanced alien civilization was placing its survival in humanity's hands, not despite our perceived weaknesses, but because of them. Admiral Chen was the first to speak. How long do we have? Kalin's scales darkened. The Vrex have detected our course change. They follow us even now. They will reach this system within 6 months. Alina looked around the room, seeing the fear on every face. But beneath the fear, she saw something else. Determination. This was humanity's moment, not just to prove themselves to the galaxy, but to themselves. Then we have work to do, she said, her voice stronger than she felt. Let's get started. As the briefing ended, Kalin approached Alina privately. The alien scales had shifted to a color she hadn't seen before, a deep, resonant gold that seemed to glow from within. There is something I have not shared with your leaders, Kalin said, voice lowered. Something I feared might be misunderstood. Alina tensed. What is it? The Novali have legends, ancient stories passed down through generations. They speak of a time before our technological advancement, when we faced extinction from another threat. The legends say we were saved by a young species, passionate and unpredictable, who taught us to fight in ways we have forgotten. You think that species was human? That's impossible. We've never left our solar system. Callan's scales rippled. Time is not always as linear as it appears, Dr. Reyes. Perhaps we have not come to you for help. Perhaps we have come to remind you of the help you once gave us, or will give us. Before Elena could process this revelation, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Chen's voice came over the intercom, tense but controlled. Multiple objects have just entered the solar system, moving at impossible speeds. They're not Novali. Callan's scales paled to an ashen gray. The Vrex. They found us sooner than expected. Humanity's trial by fire would begin not in 6 months, but now. Humanity's response and unexpected strength. The first attack came without warning or negotiation. 3 Vrex scout ships, each the size of a small asteroid, bypassed Earth's fledgling defense network entirely. They weren't interested in humanity yet. Their target was the damaged Novali vessel in lunar orbit. From mission control, Elena watched in horror as the Novali ship maneuvered desperately, using the moon's surface as partial cover. Despite its damaged state, the vessel displayed remarkable agility, but it was clearly outmatched. "We need to help them," she urged, turning to Admiral Chen. The Admiral's face was grim. "With what? Our most advanced weapons would be like throwing rocks at those ships." "Then we throw rocks," came a voice from the doorway. President Alvarez stood there, her security detail flanking her. "Order the lunar defense platforms to engage. All of them." Chen hesitated only a moment before issuing the commands. Across the lunar surface, hastily constructed railguns. Primitive by Novali standards, but the best humanity had to offer, swiveled toward the invaders. The first salvos did exactly nothing. Tungsten rods traveling at hypersonic speeds simply disappeared before impact, apparently vaporized by some kind of defensive field. The second wave fared no better. But the attack had achieved something unexpected. The Vrex noticed humanity. One of the scout ships broke off from pursuing the Novali and turned toward the lunar installations. There was no warning beam, no visible weapon discharge. The defense platforms simply ceased to exist, reduced to their component atoms in seconds. "They're scanning our communications," warned a technician, eyes wide with panic. "They're in our systems." Screens throughout mission control flickered and died. When they reactivated seconds later, they displayed not data but images. Earth cities in ruins, oceans boiling away, humans harvested like crops. Not threats, Elena realized with a chill, but promises. Callan stepped forward, scales now a deep, determined red. "This is their way. They show you your end to paralyze you with fear." "Well, it's working," muttered someone in the back of the room. President Alvarez surveyed the horrific images without flinching. "Can we communicate with them?" "Negotiate." "The Vrex do not negotiate," Callan replied. "They consume. They adapt. They move on. This is what they have done for millennia." The president's jaw tightened. "Then we fight." "Admiral, I'm authorizing Protocol Omega." Chen's eyes widened. "Madam President, that's a theoretical last resort scenario. We've never faced extinction before." She cut him off. "Execute the protocol." Within minutes, nuclear launch facilities worldwide received unprecedented commands. Not to target Earth or near-Earth orbit, but to launch directly at the Vrex vessels. It was a desperate move, one that violated multiple space treaties, but the situation had moved beyond politics. The missiles never reached their targets. Most were destroyed mid-flight. Those that made it to near proximity detonated harmlessly against the Vrex shields. "As expected," Callan said, but without condemnation. "The Vrex have encountered such weapons many times." "Then what do we do?" Elena asked, desperation edging into her voice. It was a young lieutenant who spoke up, someone whose name Elena didn't even know. "We use what they don't expect. Something they haven't adapted to." All eyes turned to him. "The Vrex adapt to patterns, right?" to technology they've seen before, so we give them something unique to us. He gestured at the screens. They're in our systems. Let's send them something back. What followed was perhaps the strangest counter-offensive in human history. As the Vrex probed Earth's information networks, humanity responded not with firewalls or countermeasures, but with culture. Teams of programmers packaged and sent terabytes of human creativity directly into the Vrex scanning beams. Shakespeare and Bollywood musicals, jazz and heavy metal, abstract expressionism, and Renaissance paintings, quantum physics theories alongside creation myths from 100 cultures. The Vrex ships paused. Their attack on the Novali vessel temporarily halted as they processed this unexpected data stream. They're confused, Callan said, scales shifting to a curious yellow-green. Your information doesn't follow logical patterns. They can quickly categorize. The respite was brief. Within minutes, the Vrex resumed their attack, adapting to the cultural offensive. But the delay had given the Novali ship precious time to implement emergency repairs. We need something more direct, Admiral Chen said. The Lena had been quiet, mind racing through possibilities. Now she turned to Callan. You said the Vrex adapt to technology they've seen before. What about technology used in ways they haven't seen? Ways that don't make logical sense? Callan's scales rippled with interest. Explain. What emerged from that conversation was a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. Humanity couldn't match the Vrex in firepower or technology, but perhaps they could outthink them through sheer creative recklessness. Over the next 36 hours, as the Vrex methodically disabled Earth's conventional defenses, a different kind of resistance took shape. Civilian volunteers worldwide repurposed everyday technology in ways no engineer would approve. Solar arrays were modified to emit chaotic energy patterns. Radio telescopes became jammers broadcasting white noise across frequencies the Vrex used. Satellites were reprogrammed to crash themselves into precise coordinates, creating debris fields that disrupted Vrex sensors. None of these tactics caused significant damage to the invaders, but collectively, they created something the Vrex hadn't encountered before: strategic chaos. The Novali, with Callan coordinating from Earth, contributed their own expertise. They modified human technology with their advanced knowledge, not to make it more powerful, but to make it more unpredictable. The tide began to turn when Alina proposed what she called Operation Feedback Loop. Using modified Novali technology, Earth's remaining communication satellites were reconfigured to capture, amplify, and reflect the Vrex's own energy weapons back at them, not as direct attacks, but as randomized bursts of their own energy signatures. For a species that relied on precise adaptation, this created the equivalent of an autoimmune response. The Vrex ships began to target their own reflected signals, confused by the familiar but distorted patterns. It's working, Admiral Chen said in disbelief as one of the scout ships actually fired upon another, apparently mistaking the reflected signals for an attack. The confused Vrex vessels retreated to regroup, falling back to the outer solar system. It wasn't a victory. The Vrex would adapt and return, but it bought precious time. In the weeks that followed, humanity and the Novali worked together with renewed purpose. The remaining Novali refugees were evacuated to Earth, bringing with them knowledge and technology that could help strengthen the planet's defenses. But more importantly, they'd brought perspective. For thousands of years, Callan explained during a global broadcast that reached billions of humans, the Novali believed that advancement meant moving beyond emotion, beyond unpredictability. We built our civilization on logic and harmony. When the Vrex came, they exploited this predictability. They knew exactly how we would respond because we always chose the most rational path. The alien scales shifted to a warm, appreciative blue as they continued. Humanity's greatest strength is not your technology, which is primitive by galactic standards. It is not your unity, which is fragile at best. It is your beautiful, chaotic diversity of thought. You approach problems from angles other species would never consider because those approaches appear illogical or inefficient. But against an enemy like the Vrex, This irrationality becomes your greatest weapon. The Vrex returned 3 months later, not with scout ships but with a harvester, a massive vessel designed to strip planets of resources. By then, Earth was ready. The defense employed no central strategy that could be predicted and countered. Instead, hundreds of independent resistance cells worldwide implemented their own unique tactics, coordinated loosely but never following a single pattern. Some used modified novelli technology. Others relied on purely human ingenuity. A few abandoned technology altogether, using psychological and biological approaches that baffled the logic-driven Vrex swarm mind. The battle lasted 9 days. When it ended, the Vrex harvester lay derelict in orbit, its systems corrupted not by a sophisticated virus, but by thousands of contradictory human inputs that overloaded its adaptive capabilities. In the aftermath, as humanity began to process what they had accomplished, a message arrived from deep space. Other survivors of the Vrex onslaught, monitoring from hiding, had witnessed Earth's impossible victory. They were coming now, not as refugees, but as allies. 1 year after the first Novelli distress signal, Alina stood beside Callan on a newly constructed observation platform in Earth orbit. Below them, the planet continued its rotation, but much had changed. Novelli architecture now stood alongside human buildings. Technology from a dozen worlds was being integrated into Earth's infrastructure. And in shipyards stretching from Earth to Mars, a new fleet was taking shape. Vessels designed with human unpredictability and alien expertise. The Vrex will return, Callan said, scales of contemplative purple. They always do. Elena nodded. And we'll be ready. Not just humans, not just Novelli, but all of us together. There is a concept in your language, Callan replied, that the Novelli never developed. Hope. For thousands of years, we lived in certainty. We had no need for hope because we could calculate probabilities with precision. But hope exists in the space between calculation and outcome. It is uniquely human. As they watched a shuttle depart for the first human Novelli joint colony on Mars, Elena smiled. Then hope is what will give the galaxy. Starting today. The stars above them seemed brighter somehow, no longer distant and cold but filled with possibility. Humanity had taken its first steps into a larger universe, not as conquerors or as servants, but as unlikely saviors who had found strength in their perceived weaknesses. The galaxy would never be the same.